Welcome to episode 52 of the Sports Geek podcast. On this week's podcast, I chat with Shane Harmon, CEO of Westpac Stadium, on crowds, stadium technology, and just the world of sports biz in general. And we check in on the World Cup and Sports Illustrated's new digital play.
Welcome to the Sports Geek podcast, the podcast built for the sports digital marketer. And now, here's your host, who has attended MLB games in 10 MLB stadiums, Sean Callanan.
Thanks, DJ Joel. My name is Sean Callanan from Sports Geek, and you're listening to the Sports Geek podcast. Yes, 10 MLB stadiums I've been to so far. I'm very much looking forward to notching up number 11 when I go to Marlins Park at C Conference down in Miami. And I'll have to actually update my sports passport. I believe the app that Peter Robert Casey is building to keep track of what stadiums you've been to will be out soon. Check out episode 46 with my chat with Pete. This week's podcast, I catch up with another previous guest, Shane Harmon. We've had him on episode 23, but a bit more of a deeper dive discussion this week. Shane is the CEO of Westpac Stadium in Wellington, New Zealand. You would know him if you follow him on Twitter. A big share of all things sports biz. So we talk about crowds, stadium and technology, and his journey using Flipboard as a content curation tool and how he keeps up with the world of sports business. And then I chat with Al Crombie on ABC Grandstand to talk about 120 sports and a bit of a wrap of the World Cup so far. But first, here's my chat with Shane Harmon from Westpac Stadium. Very happy to welcome a good friend of mine who's been on the podcast before, all the way from New Zealand. Shane Harmon, welcome to the Sports Geek podcast.
Good afternoon, Sean.
So you have been on the podcast before, but I just want to get everyone a little bit of an intro of who you are and what you do. You are currently the CEO of Westpac Stadium in Wellington. Do you want to give everyone a little bit of background of your sports biz journey?
Sure. I've worked in sports for the last 15 years or so. Previous to sport, I worked with Citibank in a direct marketing role, and that for me was a large stepping stone into sports business. My first job in sports was with the Sydney Swans, who I joined in 2000 as membership manager. And as you know, in the AFL background, direct marketing is a key component of those roles, and I was able to transfer those skills across into a sports environment. And essentially, I've been in sports since then. Spent 3 seasons with the Swans, moved on to rugby for 5 years as head of marketing for the Rugby World Cup in 2003, and that was largely the ticket marketing program. And then I spent 3 years with Australian Rugby after that as their GM of marketing. And the opportunity then came up with a young family to maybe go overseas. So got a contact regarding the Rugby World Cup role for 2011, and we moved over here from 2008 to 2012 for to date was the highlight of my career. It was an amazing project to be involved in. It essentially was New Zealand's Olympic Games, and it was an event I think that we'll not see the scale of again in New Zealand. It was a huge ticket target. We sold $300 million of tickets. It was our only source of revenue. And we had a number of challenges through that program, as you and I have discussed before, including the Christchurch earthquake and, starting again with 8 games 6 months out from the tournament. You and I have talked at length about the whole social media scene back then, and starting in 2008, it was really just beginning to blossom at that stage, and we're very proud of some of the work we did over Rugby World Cup in that whole social media space. And I think we were the first real major event that used social media to drive engagement and actually sell tickets. I left New Zealand with a heavy heart in 2012, but moved back to Sydney, and I took up the role as Deputy CEO for the Asian Cup for 2015, and expected to see that right through until I got a call about a year and a half ago to consider this role, and very difficult decision to make, but it was an opportunity for me to do 2 things. One, to step up into a CEO role, which I always had the ambition to do, but also to move into the venue space, because I had spent my entire career on the other side of the fence as either a hirer or running or managing a major event. So just keen to spread my wings, grow, learn all the time, which I'm continuing to do every day.
So I guess that was the first question I want to ask you about. Jumping to the other side of the fence, going from the hirer, the tenant, the someone working with stadiums. What's it like being on the other side of the equation being the CEO of a stadium. Tell us a little bit about Westpac Stadium, where it's at, and then how you've sort of settled into that role.
Sure. The stadium's been open 14 years, so it was built in 2000. We are New Zealand's busiest stadium, and that we've got the busiest event calendar, and we've got some regular tenants in the Wellington Rugby, the Hurricanes, and the Phoenix. And we run a number of other major events during the year. We've got AFL, NRL, we've got the upcoming Premier League doubleheader with Newcastle and West Ham, and we've held the last two World Cup qualifiers for the All Whites as well. So we've got a and cricket. We've got a very varied calendar. We've actually got two World Cups next year. We've got the Cricket World Cup and the FIFA Under-20 World Cup. So there's a lot of major events in this part of the world, Australia and New Zealand in 2015, but I think we're the only stadium hosting both. So very, very busy period for us. I suppose transitioning into this role, it's really just given me that other side of the picture in terms of commercial negotiations and understanding the venue side of what is always a healthy commercial tension between a stadium and its hirers, and really being professional about those negotiations, ensuring both parties are going to be adequately looked after financially from events, and both are in a healthy state. But more than that, it's really for me about working collaboratively with hirers, and I don't think in Australia and New Zealand there is enough collaboration between stadium and hirers in how we actually achieve what is essentially the same end goal, which is getting more bums on seats.
Yeah, crowds is I guess an issue sort of worldwide. It's not I don't think it's located in any particular part of the world. There is the battle at the moment to get fans to the games. You're competing against the big screen TV and the very comfy couch. How do you see that, just from an overall perspective, not just with your stadium, but stadiums around the world, and this trying to drive fans into the stadium?
There's actually a uniquely New Zealand view to this, and I think that there are things that happen in New Zealand, and because we're such a small market, they happen earlier here than they happen in other parts of the world. And New Zealand's actually often used by large internationals and multinationals as a test market for research or launching products before they roll out globally. So what we've seen here over the last 10 years in New Zealand is, in particular in Super Rugby and other sports as well, is that there has largely been a decline over the last 10 years in people attending live sport. The issue is exacerbated here somewhat by the fact that we've got exceptionally high pay TV penetration in this market. We're at 52%, where I think Australia is running at around 25%, Sean, is it? Or
it's something like that, yeah.
Yeah. So we've got double the penetration here, and anybody who's interested in sport here has got a Sky TV subscription. And when Super Rugby launched in the mid-90s, and really on the crest of a wave at the start of this century, there was pretty huge crowds, but pay TV was also kicking off at that stage as well. And with that level of penetration, and even this year the TV audiences have increased again, it's very difficult for both of those barometers in a small market to be increasing. At some stage, something's got to give. The other issue we have here with rugby as well is it tends to be a nighttime product. And because of the nature of rugby, where it goes from one market into the next, New Zealand into East Coast Australia, West Coast Australia, South Africa, it's great for the TV viewer because you've got back-to-back rugby for 8 hours. But it also means that the vast majority of those games take place at nighttime. And, we have seen some correlation here between those events that we do host during the day. We tend to get better crowds than in the evening. But, we understand why that's the case. I've seen in various markets that you get 2 to 3 times the TV audience with a nighttime game versus a daytime game. But that is challenging, particularly, when you're dealing with winter sports. On a global perspective, I'm seeing these trends now being manifested globally, and I've paid close attention to some of the media coverage in Australia at the start of the season, both for NRL and AFL. But I also see this as a result of both of their new TV deals, and you don't do deals at that level without making some compromises in terms of your product. And I think scheduling is probably one of the bigger issues that has impacted on the codes in Australia this year. particularly when you're playing some of those games at times that ordinarily wouldn't be considered family or fan-friendly, Sunday nights, Monday nights, that type of thing.
I mean, I think the TV deals, especially in Australia, and for the people listening in the US, we don't. I think it's just in the last 2 years that they've been playing live TV on free to air and some on pay TV, but still a lot of it has been free to air, not on an hour delay or a half an hour delay, and that's sort of taken 2 years for that effect to roll on. We don't have the blackout rules that they have in the
Yes.
in the NFL. Excuse me. So if people have the option to, if it's a cold night, to stay. And yes, the AFL's been testing both. They've been testing a lot of things, so it's very hard to pinpoint anything in particular that might be the cause. It could be scheduling. Games on at Sunday night and Monday night haven't been a big hit. They're also experimenting with variable pricing, and there's a lot of people complaining that the confusion in the market and the price ticketing, the price of tickets going up is causing people to stop going. So there's multiple factors there, but it's definitely an issue that all codes, both definitely in Australia, are struggling with and looking to. And part of what I've been talking to people is sort of even go back to your Rugby World Cup 2011 experience, and the fact that you sold a lot of tickets using Facebook. The options now that you've got in Facebook as far as targeting the right fans and reaching those fans in a relatively cost-effective manner, I see that as a big opportunity for sports to be able to get that ticket selling opportunity to the right fan that currently is underutilised in a lot of sports. I mean, we're working on a few things with some of our teams as far as putting out the membership offer and ticketing offers to fans, but there's some really cool and I guess Facebook offers creepy options to target the right fans is probably one way of putting it.
Absolutely. I think also, I think it's important that sports and venues, particularly in Australia, because the crowds in general, compared to other parts of the world, have been very healthy. You look at the AFL, and I think it's ranked as the 4th highest attended football code in the world for average attendance. I think it's important that they don't beat themselves up too much because the numbers are still very healthy. And I think in Australia, it really leads the world in terms of membership programs, and that's something that certainly we in New Zealand can learn from, where traditionally we have not had a strong membership culture here. The majority of our sales for our events tend to happen in the days or on the day of the game. We've got a big game here tonight, the Hurricanes versus the Crusaders. Thankfully, it's really good weather here. It's a fine day, so we will have a strong walk-up crowd. However, when you're relying on late ticket sales, you are relying on hope as a strategy and hoping that the team's going well, hoping that the weather's good, whereas building up strong and loyal membership bases at the start of the season locks in a large support base at the start of the season. And I think that's what the AFL has done particularly well. And I know the NRL are obviously following that model now, and even in the US, they're looking more at the membership type program than the season pass type program. And people think they're much the same thing, but I see them fundamentally different. A season pass is a financial transaction, while a membership is an emotional one. And the AFL have been world leaders of that in that regard, and that's certainly something that I'd like to see follow suit here in New Zealand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always talking to people about membership marketing and the way it's done in Melbourne. Helping. The NRL has had the opportunity over the past 5 years to effectively do what the AFL has done in the last 15, because they've been able to accelerate it and start that messaging of this is why you need to be a member. I mean, the AFL membership sort of marketing at the moment is at the level where it's almost guilt marketing. If you're a member of that club and you see another person that says they support the club, the first thing that most fans will say is, "Are you a member of the club?" So like the membership, the marketing assets and everything is really put onto your own ambassadors, and they're effectively out there spruiking to get their friends and to sign up. So
you get the engagement at that level where the financial component of the transaction is it becomes almost more of a donation than expecting specific value in return for it. And just to give you my example, I mean, I've had the same seats at the Sydney Cricket Ground for the Swans for 16, 17 years now, and I renewed my memberships for 4 years while I was in New Zealand, even though I wasn't getting anything out of it. We wanted to sit with the same people when we eventually went back that we'd sat with for all those years, and it was also my way of supporting the club. And in some respects, that's engagement nirvana. If fans take that attitude towards supporting their teams.
So one thing that's in the solution spectrum of crowds is technology, and bringing up the technologies at the stadiums, allowing fans to connect. I've spoken to a fair few seat sponsors on the podcast about the different solutions that are available as far as rolling out stadium Wi-Fi, whether it be popping up at it or popping it up at fan zones and events. Where do you see it, both as a necessity for a stadium to roll out, and where does it play a role in getting fans through the gate?
I think, Sean, if not within 5, within 10 years, every stadium in Australia and New Zealand will be fully networked. Is my view. It will become the norm rather than the exception. I think because we've been relatively late to the party, say, compared to the US, it's probably one of those spaces where first mover advantage doesn't necessarily apply. In that, what we're seeing now are models emerging where venues and teams can actually commercialize these assets. I think the early adopters in this space, put a lot of money into this and trial them and see what return they could get. But what we're seeing now are viable commercial models that are emerging. I look at a few of the venues in Australia, and I see 3 different models already. One a stadium-funded model, which is completely funded by the stadium, and they commercialize it then through advertising rights and data rights. I've seen another model where the stadium has incurred no cost whatsoever, but the cost has been borne by the telco and technology partner. But as a result, they retain the commercialization rights. And I'm seeing a third model emerge, which is these models being funded by stadiums, but then a per game fee being passed on to hirers for them to commercialize it. So I think over the next year to 2 years, we're going to see models emerge that show the return on investment on the technology investment and how venues and teams can actually make this work. We're looking at this whole space like everybody else at the moment. We've recently constructed a new lounge on our public concourse, and for me, it's probably one of the best public spectator spaces in any stadium in Australia and New Zealand. And we've got a substantially enhanced food menu than we had previously. But we're playing with a number of pieces of technology here as well. We've installed free Wi-Fi into the lounge. We've got large IPTV video boards. Food menus that are IPTV based, mobile phone charge stations, and for us that's just a little taster of what we think is going to come here. So we're just looking at this next space at the moment. We're speaking to everybody in the market. It's a real shame that it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to make a seat this year due to commitments I have here, because obviously this is a very hot topic over there as well, and I think it's going to become a necessity. I would caution, however, that I don't necessarily see technology as a holy grail in terms of crowds suddenly doing going upwards again. I just think this is going to become one of the expectations from fans that this is something that we're going to have. And I don't necessarily think that it's necessarily going to result in massive increases in crowds. I think teams and venues, there are probably other basic elements that we need to be working on and getting right before we even make that level of investment too. I mean, one very simple area that is mentioned to me regularly is the whole area of beer porridge. And you go to any stadium in Australia, New Zealand, and there's normally a porridge partner that's either tied to the venue or the team, but there tends to be very little choice. And we're in a very sophisticated city here. We've got more craft beer bars in Wellington than we do in Sydney, for example. And if I asked 10 Wellingtonians, would you rather local craft beer or free Wi-Fi in the stadium, I reckon 9 out of 10 would tell me local craft beer. So there's a whole lot of other areas. I think it's a component, but it's not the holy grail in itself.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it is becoming, I think it was said at Seat last year that it's going to be just another utility of a stadium in the same way that you need bathrooms. Wi-Fi will be just something that people need, but people aren't going to a rugby game or a baseball game or a football game to be on their phone. But if you have the Wi-Fi, how can you enhance the experience? So it is a matter of how can we do things like the Warriors are looking to do with their new app and having geolocation locked highlights that only come up on the mobile app when you're at the stadium,
Yeah.
or special offers like when you're walking around Sporting KC's venue. If you're at the north end of the stadium, a special offer will come compared to the south end of the stadium. I think that's the wow factor that's going to really reach that younger demographic that really sort of love that type of stuff. But then the other point of, I guess, the connected stadium, which is sort of, I think it's phase 2 for a lot of the stadiums that are rolling it out, and chatted with Fiona Green about it on a previous podcast, and she'll be at Seat as well, is the data side of it. Like how much data can you get from that implementation as far as getting more access to your fans, what they're doing, that kind of thing. That's a really big piece that can maybe help better inform you going down the track of attracting the right fans and those kind of things. So it's not just putting in the infrastructure, it's how you go about using it and what you do with the data that you capture from it.
And absolutely, Sean. And in terms of planning in advance of making those investments, it's the data, as you know, on its own doesn't do anything. When you're making these investments, you also need to think of the resources that you need behind the scenes to be able to make sense of this data and to identify trends and to actually make it usable. There's no point in collecting this data if you're not going to be able to analyze it and get actionable insights.
Yeah, and that's the next money ball. Like that's the business money ball they got, and that's what with guys like Russell Scabetti and all the crew that will be in the CRM track at Seat. That's their value in understanding that data and then being able to come back to those fans with the right offer to get them to be coming back again and again and again.
I think so, and I think, and again, it's you look at these types of offers that are coming up on phones. It's fine balance between sending offers through all the time, and then it's looking at other areas of value add. So we're looking to develop an app at the moment. It'll probably take a while before we get to a place where we're going to do video streaming in stadium, because we need to look at the broadcast rights and who owns them, etc. So there's a whole minefield to work through there. But even looking at feedback that comes from fans and through social media and identifying the problems that fans incur while they're in the stadium, and how you can use technology to overcome those problems. One very small example I just saw the other day that we said what a great idea to incorporate into the app is we've got a commuter car park here during the week. However, on event days that happen during the week, it's closed to the public. But we're not particularly good in communicating that. And I noticed a couple of tweets saying, "Oh bugger, I've just driven past the stadium, it's closed. Where am I going to park now? I'm going to be late for work, etc." A notification alert for people who have the app. If there are issues with the car parking, they would receive that notification the night before, and they'd be sweet. They'd be able to make their plans in advance. And it's just a very, very small example of a problem that I saw come to us via social media that I could see technology actually having a role in performing. And I think when you scratch beneath the surface, you're going to find all of those little problems that an app can help deal with those issues as they arise on game day or outside of game day.
Yeah, I think the customer service side of things is critical. I mean, it's so easy for a stadium to do, and especially if you're building that kind of app, no one's going to go into that app to check the scores or get an update. They've got apps for that. So you're pretty much looking at, and I'd send people to Jay Baer's book Utility, and I'll put the link in the show notes. But he goes through a whole bunch of examples where the marketing, or the app in this case, is built as a utility for the fan. And so that's a perfect example of I need to find out if I can get the parking. It's going to tell me, and it's making it useful. Whether it's the short, Shane, the shortest beer line is this one. Go to Bay 13, not Bay 17. like that is a valuable app that people will want to open up again and again.
And I completely agree. And I think stadiums, and I've seen it through social media, will sometimes fall into the trap where they're putting across the same content as the team. And really, a stadium should not be providing live score updates, as far as I'm concerned, via social media. That is the role of the team and the code. Certainly a halftime score or a full-time score is fine. But a live commentary on the game, for me, from a stadium doesn't work. And I see some stadiums now. Stadiums have probably been late to the game in social media, but I see MCG, ANZ Stadium are doing some good work in this space, and I think social media also allows stadiums to develop a bit of a personality. So otherwise they're a multi-facility building. The hero is the code or the team or the players, etc. But it really allows the stadium to develop a bit of a personality as well. And we're finding Twitter in particular is becoming an increasingly important customer service tool for us.
Yep.
We've got we're just revamping our sales and marketing team here, but we are bringing on board, starting the week after next, a fan engagement and digital manager. It'll be a multifaceted role, but it'll be really about lifting our social customer service on match day, and addressing issues and opportunities as they arise, and jumping into conversations if there are problems. Because inevitably, when you've got 20, 30,000 people in a stadium, you're going to have issues. And I think, like any form of customer service or customer complaint, it's actually how you respond to those issues is going to be key to retaining and keeping a happy fan.
Yeah, and the critical thing when you're doing that kind of thing is to get whoever is driving the Twitter and seeing those posts connected to the control room so it actually happens. So
couldn't agree more.
There's nothing worse than, as a social person, saying, yes, no worries, we'll get it fixed, but not knowing if it got fixed, because you can't go out and see if that toilet stopped flooding or that line for the hot dogs has got shorter. There's a lot of there's got to be a lot of trust with your whole team, but if you can get that flow right, it can be really, the response online can be really good, because a lot of the time the customer just wants to be heard, and if you're on the process of solving it, you can turn around that complaining fan rather quickly.
Absolutely, and I mean, I see the role of this person on game days that they'll be roving around the stadium, looking at some photo ops, obviously, and fan shots leading into the game, and what we're doing as a stadium, and what food items we have on special or have launched, etc. But during the game, this person is most likely going to be sitting in that control room next to the operational guys, and monitoring the issues, monitoring the discussion, and being proactive as issues arise. It's a brave step forward for venues, and they really need to be set up operationally to do this. My recommendation is that a venue should not be on Twitter unless it has the capability to be able to react to issues on game day.
Yep.
Because I then think you're really not in it seriously if you're not able to have that discussion on those key couple of hours once a week, twice a week, where you actually have a full stadium.
One thing I did want to ask you about is your meteoric rise with your Flipboard. Tell us about how you use Flipboard, where you get your content, and if again, for my listeners, I'll put in the show notes Shane's rockstar in the Flipboard space with his own Sports Biz magazine. Takes a little bit through how that came about.
I fell in love with Flipboard very early on, Sean. It's a very visual medium, and it really takes your Twitter feed, your Facebook feed, all of your social feeds, particularly those stories that have got a photographic element to them, and and turns it into this online magazine. The app itself is a beautiful app. It's beautifully designed, allows you to flick through stories and see what's of interest. About a year and a half ago, Flipboard allowed its users to create their own magazines, and you can curate your own content, or you can add on friends or colleagues to your account to also add content to it. And because this was at the very beginning, I set up a sports business magazine. I think it's called Sports Business Today. And all I do each day is I monitor the key sports business hashtags that you see on social media. So Sports Biz is one, Social for Tickets, I think, is another. Fan engagement is another. So just those key hashtags that are used on Twitter to generate that conversation around sports business. Now it involves me each morning or each night just filtering through probably a lot of rubbish. But because I've started to grow quite a following, I've had over 9,000 readers now. I do feel a personal sense of responsibility, and what I'm posting on there is actually very relevant. The content is probably more geared towards the digital, social, fan engagement ticketing space. So it's particularly in the fan space. But if there's anything else of general interest, I'll put it up there. And I've had a lot of positive feedback on it. It's the numbers that I've got on it there. There's been 200,000 page flips. I've posted 2,200 stories. So if you're looking to go through the minefield that is social media and RSS feeds and everything, trying to find the best of sports business daily, what I've done is curated it so it should all be there. There wouldn't be too many that are escaping my attention, and if there are, send it my way and I'll add it to my magazine.
Yeah, I mean, I hadn't found a spot for where to use Flipboard for a long while, and it wasn't until I got the iPad Mini and that I started using it again. I just never sort of found a space for it in sort of how I go about finding content. But yeah, going to your, like I find a stack of stuff from yours. I've started my own Flipboard magazine. I'm like, oh damn, Shane's already posted it. It's like, I get very competitive. Yeah. So I do reflip a lot of the stuff that you're putting up in the same space. But yeah, it's just the fact that you can pull in all the different streams, here's your LinkedIn feed, here's a specific Twitter list, here's what people are saying from Facebook, and even just the cover stories that it promotes of all those magazines, it does, it sort of gets the algorithm right of these are things you should read.
Sure, absolutely. And look, it's a relatively manual process for me. I mean, I tend to look at it curated each morning and then each evening when I go home. But I really enjoy it. And, as I said at the start, in this industry 15 years, but there's not a day goes by that I'm not learning something new. And, it's an industry that evolves very quickly, and we really all need to stay on our guard and just keep learning and look what's happening around the world, what, best practice. And, every day I see something that amazes me or thrills me, and, it's a great resource. And hopefully I've taken a lot of the heavy lifting at it for people who are looking for this content. So, jump on board and subscribe to it, and tell me what you think.
Yep. Well, I better wrap this episode, or this interview at least, up. Otherwise, I'll go over the optimum time for a podcast, which I've been told is around 40 minutes. I'll try to keep it around that time, to keep it within a commute or a gym session. So I'll wrap this up. I've got a couple of quick questions at the end to hit you up with in the world of sport. Now, this one, obviously you can't name Westpac Stadium, but what's the best stadium that you've attended?
That for me would probably be AT&T Park in San Francisco. I think, from a customer service and an atmosphere and a technology perspective, they're the leaders. And I've been there on a number of occasions, and it's probably why I keep going back. It's anybody in sports business or stadiums and teams that hasn't been there should go and get a look.
Yep, I completely agree with you on that one. What about a must follow? Pick. It doesn't matter what platform it is. Who do you want to give a shout out on someone that people should be following?
Oh, look, there's a few people in sports that I've followed from the very beginning. I'll absolutely name yourself, Sean, as one of the key people that I follow in terms of keeping up to date what's happening in the industry. But other people in the US, Brian Gaynor, who's been to Sydney before for Sport is Fantastic conference and is a good friend and is an industry leader. Russell Scabitti, you mentioned earlier on, Lou Imbriano, and there are a few others there that are really good sports business Twitter handles, and they're guys that I follow on a daily basis.
And a best sports biz tip.
The fan is the number one stakeholder in sport as far as I'm concerned, and I think if you get the fan right and you have a vibrant and large and healthy fan base, everything else follows. Without a large fan base and an engaged fan base, there are ultimately no sponsors, there are no broadcasters, there are no paid professional players, and I think sports sometimes lose sight of that. So for me, it's about elevating the fan and making the fan the number one stakeholder in sport.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Especially with looking and working with teams with the social. A lot of the time they're looking at growing their likes and getting more fans. I'm like, but your key fans, they're already liking you, and you've got to deepen your engagement with those ones.
Absolutely.
Because they're the key ones. They're the ones that are the members, the season ticket holders are turning up. So, and in a long history in working in sport, what is your best sporting memory?
Look, it'll be the whole Rugby World Cup experience. The reward at the end of the day on a very long and difficult journey. I suppose reminiscing in Eden Park after the final when the All Blacks beat France in a game where probably France should have actually won it. But there was this enormous emotional tension just lifted across the country after that game, and it was a huge celebration at the end of a very tough year for New Zealand after Christchurch. So for me, it was probably that Rugby World Cup final.
Well, thank you very much, Shane, for joining me. Don't forget you can follow Shane on Twitter at Shane Harmon. Very easy to find him on Twitter, and we'll have a link to your Flipboard in the show notes. And I hope to catch up with you for one of those craft beers sooner rather than later.
Sounds good.
Cheers, mate.
Thanks, Sean.
Sign up for Sports Geek News at sportsgeekhq.com/sign up now.
Thanks again to Shane Harmon. I am looking forward to catching up with him for a beer, as we did at Major League Baseball in Sydney. And I hope to catch him at Seat next year if he can't make it this year with the Premier League match at Westpac Stadium. For those of you who haven't registered for Seat yet, there still is a few spots left. I was speaking to Christine. Over 700 attendees are going to be in Miami. That's a 60% jump in attendees from last year in Kansas City. Simply go to sportsgeekhq.com/Seat2014. Obviously, you can listen to a couple of the podcasts that I've done so far with Seat sponsors and the people who are going to be at Seat to understand why you should be there. Also, if you've got any campaigns that you want me to profile in my book for digital campaigns around the world, please send them in. I've got some really great ones from NASCAR, the Kings, Tampa Bay Lightning, V8 Supercars, Portland Trailblazers, the NBA and more. So yeah, I'd really love to see your best campaigns and profile them in that book that I'm going to launch at Seat. That sound that you can hear underneath me is from the FA Cup, and Dave Burtonshaw spoke about it on episode 50, and he sent in this is what happened after the FA Cup final. So very fond memories there for Arsenal fans. Dave Burtonshaw did say it was one of the best moments he's been to from a live event point of view, and obviously a big moment for previous guests like Rich Clark, who was calling the game for Arsenal.com. Changing the show up a little bit. This clock is telling me to wind up and get out of the podcast. This is episode 52. You get those notes at sportsgeekhq.com/52. Going to finish off this episode with my chat with Al Crombie, who filled in for Francis Leach on ABC Grandstand, with a little bit of a chat about 120 sports and also the World Cup.
Time to welcome a good friend of the program, Mr. Sean Callanan from sportsgeekhq.com. And I must say, he's looking more sport than geek this morning. He's got the skins on. He's got the sporting attire.
You don't want to put people off their breakfast. G'day, Al. How you doing?
I'm very well, mate. Great to have you back on the program. We had a little hiatus up in Sydney, so we didn't get to see you. But it's been a busy period. Social media is just been absolutely going off in this World Cup.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I mean, we've seen stacks of, content shared by the teams and by FIFA, but it's really the fans getting involved, which has completely changed the perspective of how people are seeing and interacting with the World Cup. And so, you know, we spoke with the guys a couple of weeks ago about, you know, the different memes coming in. We've seen, you know, Robin van Persie's first goal with his flying headers and people taking that. And, the Suarez bite has been, you know, something of mirth throughout the internet. And I think it is a cautionary tale for marketers. I mean, I've been talking about the World Cup being the best footballers on the pitch, but it's also the world's best marketers, you know, presenting their wares. And unfortunately for Adidas, they've done a whole campaign around all of their athletes, you know, because they're in the fight with the other boot manufacturers. And, you know, they've got Messi leading it. And if you look at the photo, it's Luis Suarez effectively chomping down or, you know, growling, looking like he's about to bite something.
It's just a lot of teeth.
A lot of teeth. And the thing is, these posters are all around Brazil. So, you know,
bus stops and all
bus stops, everything like that. So if you pretty much Google, you know, selfies and Suarez, you'll see there's fans taking selfies, putting their arm inside his mouth due to the biting incident. So, you know, whether the Adidas people come back and say, "Oh, look at our brand recognition; it's all over the web," or and that's what, you know, partly they might say that's great, it's great buzz, but they might be reconsidering whether to have him on board as an endorser if he keeps biting people. I mean, I think a meme reaches its zenith when the Wiggles are making fun of you. The Wiggles have brought out a song about the biting incident, and they pretty much said, "This is really for your mum and dad's kids." So, you know, if you're getting that kind of attention, it's just sort of a completely different way to consume your sport.
Indeed. Yeah, those marketing men would have been sweating heavily, wouldn't they? And I believe Suarez has lost a big deal with a big betting agency in the UK recently, or I think UK, just in the last couple of days. So, you know, it's all falling apart.
The moral compass of a betting agency, that's how bad it's got. I mean, you know, so if he's lost a betting company, you know, who knows what's going to follow him, and he might even move on from his club and all that kind of stuff because he's got a 4-month ban and all of those kind of things. So
I want to see someone be bold and, you know, get a toothpaste endorsement or something. Yeah. Just come out and say, well, you know.
Oh, I'm sure. I mean, that
doesn't matter what you eat; they still need to be white.
There was a lot of marketers that did jump on board. You know, they pretty much, Snickers did a great ad. You know, you have it when you have a Snickers, when you're hungry, you won't be angry. There was a whole bunch of brands that sort of jumped on the moment to sort of say, you know, here, take a chomp out of this pizza, that kind of thing.
It's
so,
incredible. Yeah.
Again, part of that, you know, what is now moment marketing, in the same way that Oreo put up the Oreo tweet when the Super Bowl blacked out. There's that kind of stuff. So
it's just the immediacy, isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah, and they got a lot of kudos because, you know, the fans go, "Oh, that's funny. I'm gonna pass it on." And effectively, it's a free ad.
Yeah.
But there was a really big change or a big announcement this week with the announcement of the 120 Sports Network. It launched just this week, and it's pretty revolutionary as far as the partnerships that are involved. So it's a partnership between Time Incorporated, which is Sports Illustrated, but it's got the Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, and NASCAR all partners with it, and which is, you know, having the different leagues collaborating on a digital effort is quite remarkable, because normally they're all trying to work on their own patches, and they're effectively competing against those fans in some sense. And so this 120 network is effectively a collaboration with those partners to create content and effectively its own digital channel. So it's a little bit of a startup competitor to the ESPNs of the world and the other big media players. So the 120 name comes from 120 seconds. So again, everyone's got to have a little catch, a little elevator pitch. And so what they're going to be doing is creating these 120 2-minute video clips of game highlights, talking heads, issues of the day, that kind of thing. And it's going to be curated and sort of populated by the popularity in social media and how much it's getting played. And it's really targeted at that younger generation that just wants to consume that short form media. So it'll be really interesting to see, one, how it goes. It's backed by, and I've spoken to Frank before about the technology behind it, but Major League Baseball Advanced Media, which is the tech company behind all the things that you see for Major League Baseball. So they're providing all the tech, the live streaming services and those kind of things. So you can go to 120sports.com and just be sitting and watching videos and picking clips which you want to watch. They'll have, I think it's 8 hours of live programming a day. So they'll be churning out a lot of content. And, so why are all these leagues sort of joining up? Again, it's a way for you to get a taste for, now I am following a little bit more Major League Baseball. I'm not behind that paywall that is Major League Bat. And again, it's about deepening ties with your fans to go, oh, hang on now, I do want to consume more content. I mean, all the studies have shown that if you give fans more content to consume, they will watch more. So even if we go back to when YouTube live streamed some of the 2020 cricket in the IPL in India, and you're able to watch the games on live via YouTube, people who were watching more clips and more opportunity to watch more on YouTube meant they watch more TV. So this whole idea of digital and mobile cannibalising TV numbers is actually the opposite. The more people get to watch when they want to watch it means they actually want to watch it in all its glory. I mean, if you're a massive baseball, basketball fan, hockey fan, NASCAR fan, yes, it's great to be able to catch up on the bus with a 2-minute video on the NBA draft or whatever is happening, but then you want to go watch it on your big screen. So sort of one feeds another. There'll obviously be advertising play in there.
Yep.
They're going to have... It's available on multiple apps, so you can get it on a mobile, get it on an iPad, tablet kind of thing. So, again, I think it's probably in the right sweet spot. We've sort of seen short video come along from a social media point of view. We've got Vine, which is 6 seconds. What can you tell people in 6 seconds? Not much. Instagram has a 15-second video, but it's not really where you go to watch video.
Yeah.
Whereas this, it's dedicated. You want to get the latest clips and highlights. So if a Giants pitcher throws a no-hitter, you can get it on there and watch it there. And then the idea is you would start showing your preferences and, they would have obviously advertising data, but then you would start saying, oh, I'm really getting into the baseball season, I'm following that story, and it'll go back to the properties.
Do they get a lot of objection from the ESPNs and whatnot in the sense that they'll be, taking away, in a sense, customers, and the fact that all these big sports are on board as well? Did it cause a bit of kerfuffle in the States?
ESPN's a pretty big beast. I mean, they're probably just seeing it as a bit of a side play for those leagues. I mean, and it has been, there is a bit of competitiveness in the same way it is in Australia between the leagues broadcasting their own content versus the broadcasters. But I think they're pretty much, because it's a digital play, there's this culture of cord cutting as far as getting, separating yourself from cable and not paying the cable fees. That's where the play is. Now it's it's 4 days old, so it's a bit early to tell if it's going to have some success. But the thing for the teams why can't they monetize that sort of thing? But yeah, where it will get interesting is if it starts affecting broadcasters deciding whether they want to pay for rights or whether leagues decide, well, we like our rights the way they are and we can monetize them better than what you can pay. So that's always going to be the push and pull between, digital and TV. And, if they raise their game, there's most likely from a competitive point of view, ESPN will probably come back with a counter. They'll probably come back with some video play. They've got Watch ESPN, they've got all these different opportunities, but they might say, well, that's actually working. So what are they, imitation's better than innovation. They'll just go and copy it and do their own spin in it. So the end result, the leagues will get, will get exposure. The one note of the partnership, there's one rather big league that's not involved, the NFL. They're quite happy doing their own thing. They're quite happy. Yeah. They're quite happy keeping it all in the house. They don't want to share. They don't want to play. They don't want to play with the other boys in town. So, that's about the only one that's not there, but it'll still have a swag of really great content on it.
Is it a free app? Is it going to cost? So it's not going to be $5 a month, or do you see it progressing that way? A lot of these things start free, and then you'll end up paying for a service.
It could progress that way, but I think because it is, league based, and it's a bit more, altruistic in that they want to promote their leagues and their content and effectively drive traffic eventually back to their own sites. I think that's probably not the way they'll go. They'll league sponsors and there'll be activations through that and that kind of stuff. But I don't think it'll be a paid thing. But who knows? They might head down that path. Major League Baseball at Bat has done that. WWE, we spoke about before, has, they're on that Major League Baseball Advanced Media Network, and it's a pay for play type service. So it might be if you can get the volume, it might be you get to watch 20 videos a month, and if not, you can pay $2 and be on board.
Yeah.
You know, and again, it's just a subscriber thing. So I don't think they'll be at that point just yet.
Sounds like a pretty handy one-stop shop, though, for sports lovers, just to get your dose, you know, coming in on the train or the tram and, you know, getting all those little snippets that you need, you know, bite-sized, like you said, 2 minutes. I mean, this is your reel. Do you see it? Do you see this kind of, you know, heading to the future and more collaboration between these big sports?
Well, the collaboration one is the interesting twist.
Yeah.
On this. I'm
amazed it happened.
Yeah, that's the thing, and that was the big announcement around it. I think the trend for more video. And more teams doing, you know, more content, more video from sports teams is definitely the way to go. Every team that we're working with, and everyone, people want to consume more video. So finding that sweet spot of one, how you can best consume it in that manner is the way to go. So and that's what this has been built for. It's been built for you to watch a quick mobile version, share it with your mates, that kind of thing. So it's a really big player. If you look at you know, the NBA draft. You know, there was stacks of video going out, stacks of interviews, really great coverage by the NBA.
Interesting. Watch this space. We'll keep track of it with you, Shawnee. We'll see you next Saturday. For everyone that wants some more detail on this, they can hit your website.
SportsGeekHQ.com or SportsGeek Podcast in the iTunes store.
Lovely. Appreciate you coming in. Just wrapping up, heading up towards news time. Hang around after the news. Frankie will join us live from Brazil. And we'll also chat with Brett McKay and cover the Super Rugby action. Of course, it's back on board after a little 3-week international hiatus. But why don't we head up to the news and hear some of the Wiggles. Probably the first and only time it'll ever be played on Grandstand Breakfast Ideas Day. But let's hear what all the fuss is about.
If Suarez is feeling hungry at the World Cup, he takes a bite.
He takes a bite.
If his tummy starts to rumble at the World Cup, he takes a bite.
He takes a bite.
He loves the tasty dish of Italian Chilini.
Chilini.
A dash of salt and pepper on the shoulder. Oh, yummy.
Oh, yummy.
Suarez, Suarez, Italian you will eat. Suarez, Suarez, Chilini's such a treat. He's such a treat, he's such a treat, he's such a treat, he's such a treat. Italian you will eat, even if it's on 2 feet. Suarez, Suarez, Italian you will eat. Suarez, Suarez, Chilini's such a treat. He's such a treat, he's such a treat, he's such a treat, he's such a treat. Italian you will eat, even if it's on 2 feet.
Please leave a review on iTunes. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/iTunes. Find all Sports Geek podcasts at sportsgeekhq.com/SGP. Need help with your content? Book in for a content brainstorming session with Sports Geek now. Go to sportsgeekhq.com/work. Thanks for listening to the Sports Geek Podcast.